Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they've built a very good reputation for themselves in that short lifetime. Now, if people were to ask me about the brewery, I would say that they're best known for the different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their fruity, juicy, modern, Nordic, smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know these guys can do very well, but it's a little bit different within that style category compared to what we've had from them before. It's one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and it is supposed to be very, very nice. And I always enjoy the beers that I try from these guys every month, actually. So, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get the Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review we are going to go to the Hisingen area and we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters as it would be in English. So this particular beer is called Bunny Business. It comes in at 6% ABV, and this one can be described as a pastry sour. So this one, compared to the other sour beers we've had from them before, this one should be a little bit more kind of savoury. The ingredients that they've put into this one are blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackcurrants, and then caramel, vanilla and sea salt. Now, most of the time with these Fermenterarna beers, it tends to only be fruit that they add in on top, but this is the first one that I've had where they've added a little bit of vanilla or you know, something just a little bit more kind of savoury, if you like. So this one can be termed a pastry sour from what I understand, but yeah, it should be quite an interesting beer, I have to say. So yeah, this was released as part of the Lokallt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I think this one is one of the March beers that I didn't get the chance to review before I went off to Japan. So yeah, definitely cool to have this one on the channel. It feels like a little bit of, it seems like a little bit of a long time actually since I reviewed a sour beer from Fermenterarna, but the last Fermenterarna review was in December of last year if I remember correctly. But yeah, as always we'll keep an eye on what these guys are releasing and review more and more things from them as time goes on. But yeah, Bunny Business, 6% fruited sour beer with vanilla and caramel and a little bit of salt in it from what I understand. Let's crack on with this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, however, you can just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things. And you can, of course, check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you once again about Fermenterarna. So, Fermenterarna was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, and this was back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, very close to the Norwegian border, a very pretty little fishing town from what I gather, and somewhere that I would like to go and visit. But apparently the two of these guys had very different journeys when it came to kind of getting into craft beer. So Niklas ordered a beer in a bar one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was none other than the Tropic Thunder from Digesbryggeri, and this is, for me, the kind of cult classic Swedish sour beer. This is where it really kind of began for sour beers, in my opinion, in Sweden. And he just loved it, and you know, that blew his mind. This is what beer could actually be. But Anna, on the other hand, had a long interest in things that ferment, and she ran the restaurant Coasters Trädgårdar, which had made things like sauerkraut, sourdough bread, you name it, she's played with it and fermented it. So yeah, very different journeys into, you know, getting interested in fermentation and getting interested in craft beer. But when they started homebrewing a little bit and experimenting with stuff, but they actually decided to go commercial a little bit later on. So the brewery started out with a very small 200-litre brew kit and tanks in late 2018, and they actually took a break to expand the company after their beers had been very well received at different festivals that they'd attended. But after this, they boasted a new facility with two 500-litre brew kits, a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres, and over the course of 2019 they produced around 50,000 litres, although they had the equipment to brew around 250,000 litres of beer per year apparently. But over the next few years they continued to develop new recipes, experiment a little bit. They started to focus on the kind of New England hazy IPAs and also the fruity juicy sour beers, and then in August of 2021 they moved to a new brewery in the Hisingen area in Gothenburg, taking their equipment with them, but they also received a new 3,000 litre brew kit later that year, and they do plan to open up a taproom and restaurant at some point at the brewery in the very near future, but these plans were of course put on hold during the COVID pandemic. But over the last few years, these guys have continued to do some really interesting beers. According to Untappd, they've produced around 170 different kinds of beer as of April 2023 when I'm filming this review for you. And on a personal note, I would say that these guys are a Swedish brewery that you really do need to check out. When it comes to these two style categories, these guys are doing some really interesting stuff. But I do hope in the future they try a few more different styles. I have seen a few different styles from these guys be released through the likes of Glassbanken and things like that, so I'll need to have a little look at trying to get a hold of some of those through Copenhagen or something like that as time goes on. But yeah, in terms of New England hazy IPAs and fruity juicy sours, these guys are one of the really good breweries in Sweden that you should check out just now. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more about the brewery, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one then, before we open it up. So you can see the artwork on this is kind of similar. It's the same style that we've seen from Fermenterarna before. I don't know if it's Anna or Niklas that do these themselves, because the artwork is very distinctive. But you can see on the top of the can there, you've got this lovely kind of golden top there. You can see there is one of the Fermenterarna symbols. But yeah, this is a 440 milliliter can. This was released, I think this is one of the March beers, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure this was a March 2023 release. But I paid about 50 Swedish krona for this one, so that's about €5, £4.50 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $5.50 American. But as we said earlier, this one comes in at 6% ABV, and it's got blackberries, strawberries, blueberries and blackcurrants in it, but also some caramel, vanilla and sea salt. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. Definitely, this will be more of a kind of savoury sour beer, this one, rather than the kind of smoothie ones that we've had before, I would think. But let's get it out into the glass and see what it's all about. I always like seeing when breweries experiment a little bit more. And this one should be, as I say, very, very interesting. But Fermenterarna are one of the breweries that I really like just now. And yeah, I always keep an eye out for the different things that they're doing. So, here we are. I think that's enough to take a wee look at the colour of the beer for the moment, and we'll put the rest in a little bit later on. So, yeah, you can see that this beer is poured pretty much kind of as you would expect from a modern sour beer with these different kinds of fruits in it. So, in terms of the head on this one before it disappears, I would say this beer is poured with about 1/3 of a finger of a frothy, kind of pink tinted header. That's faded away to be a thin foamy layer in the middle and a nice thicker foamy ring around the edge. So you can see kind of small foamy bubbles there, a few medium sized ones toward the bottom, but yeah, it goes together very, very nicely. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this beer, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the bottom of the glass there and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head. But the head has, of course, just faded away to be a little bit more of a kind of wispy layer, actually. But yeah, this goes together very nicely, I would say. I do like how this beer goes, to be honest with you. In terms of the colour, this is quite interesting, this one. You know, with all the different fruits in here, you need to think about the combination of these things. So yeah, we've got blackcurrants, blackberries, strawberries, and what was the other one? We have blueberries. Yeah, that was it. That's the one I've missed. So yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort ball is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. But any barrel aging or any adjuncts you put in will affect the colour too. And when it comes to these more kind of modern, fruity, sour beers like this, you are depending quite a lot on your adjuncts and your fruits that you put into them. So yeah, to be honest, the colour of this one, this sort of burgundy, Heart of Midlothian football shirt, as I would describe it, this kind of nice burgundy is not really a surprise when you consider what fruits are in this beer. When you shine the light through this one, you can see it's got a little bit of a kind of hazy, note to it. But considering that it contains oats and wheat, that's not really a surprise either. And maybe some of the darkness of the colour can be attributed to the presence of the caramel in this one. But yeah, to be honest, not really surprised about the colour of this beer, considering the stuff that's in it. Let's just have a wee look at the aroma and see how we get on with this one. And as I've said before, for me, these modern sour beers, quite often they can be very straightforward in terms of their aroma profile and flavour profile, but if they're done well, they're beautiful beers to drink. So let's see what this one does. Oh yeah, I'm going to say absolutely. You can smell the more savoury note to this one in comparison with what we've had from Fermenterarna before. Absolutely, yeah. But the beer does smell very, very nice. Yeah. So, first impression of this one. You have this sort of backbone of cocoa nibby, cakey type character to this one. So absolutely a pastry stout. Like a kind of, it's not granola, it is more of a kind of cakey thing. And one of the things that often put me off pastry stouts and pastry sours is that kind of granola flavour that you can get out of them. But yeah, it depends. As I say, it kind of depends on how they're done. There's a few breweries in Sweden that are very good at these just now. Duck Pond is one, Elm 11, and then these guys. There are others that I'm probably missing. Morgendagens were also very good, but they've gone bust, unfortunately. Yeah, so in terms of this beer, compared to the other ones we've had within the sour beer category from Fermenterarna, this is quite different. It still has the big fruitiness that you would expect from these guys, but yeah, absolutely more savoury in its base, definitely. But it does smell very nice. Let's try and break this down and just describe it for you a wee bit more, sort of in depth. So the backbone of the beer, you absolutely have a little bit of this. You do get a little bit of this kind of fresh, kind of brown bready bread crust, but then it has this sort of spongy, savoury, dry, cakey character to it. So yeah, like a dry, caramelly, savoury cake type note. On top of that, the cakey notes, within the cakey notes, it's like a caramel sponge, to be honest with you. You can smell a little bit of the oaty, creamy note out of this one. You know, the sort. I always find that these kind of modern sour beers give you this yogurty, coconutty type quality, actually. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that particular sense is really, really interesting. So yeah. Just say you've got that bread crusty base, the kind of cakey, spongy type note out of it, and then you also have just that little bit of you've got a little bit of kind of wholemeal brown bread or white bread in there, but then the yogurty notes out of this one. I always describe the aroma of these beers as being like petit filou yogurty notes, so there's definitely some of that going on here. I do get the vanilla. I absolutely get the vanilla within that yogurty character that I'm talking about, and you can smell that. But the oats, I think the oats are what give you the kind of yogurty note out of the beer. You can certainly smell a little bit of the saltiness in the top of the nose with this beer as well. So yeah, the malty character in this one is quite interesting, and that's where this beer really varies in comparison with what we've had from Fermenterarna before, at least in the aroma. We haven't actually tasted the thing yet. So yeah, the malty base in this one is quite nice, like bread crust, caramelly sponge cake, a little bit of a white bready character, the kind of yogurty, petit filou sort of things. And you certainly get a good little bit of sweet caramel and a little bit of an almost biscuity character out of this one too, and the wee bit of saltiness is in the top of the nose there. Yeah, I do like how this beer goes together in that particular sense. The malty side of things is really interesting. Now, on to the hoppy side of the beer. Now, this is the thing with Fermenterarna. As far as I'm aware, these guys don't use hops in their beers, and this is a big, well, it's not a big point of debate, but it just depends on what mentality a brewer adopts, to be honest with you. When it comes to the old, woody, traditional Belgian sour beers, what they used to do was put in older hops that had lost a little bit of their alpha acid potency, and the reason for that was that they didn't want the hoppy bitterness to detract from the sourness of the beer. Makes sense. But when it comes to more modern sour breweries like this, who are doing the kind of creamy, fruity sours, there's a bit of a debate there, because if you add hops into the beer, it does add a little bit more depth, but you don't need to do that, because you can still get a lovely big fruity flavour. So it really just depends on what the brewer actually wants to do. And whenever you add fruits into a beer as well, it's always going to suppress a little bit of the kind of green component from the hops, and that's the debate. Is it worth doing it? Is it not? Again, it depends. It varies from brewer to brewer. Fermenterarna tend not to add hops into their sour beers, from what I know. Whereas, like for example, Vault City and Holy Goat back home in Scotland, they do add it. So yeah, it just kind of depends. I think in Sweden it's not so common to add hops into these sort of modern smoothie sour beers, as we would call them. But yeah, in this beer, despite that, even if you don't add hops into these beers, I always find you get a little bit of this placebo kind of green component out of it. So for me, this beer absolutely has it. There's a little touch of earthiness, there's a little bit of herbal note, and I do get this kind of woody, grassy type note out of this one, and that's probably just from the presence of the berries. It's this sort of bramble wood type thing. My gran and grandpa always had brambles in their garden, so when we tasted these, you could just taste this woody character to the fruits when you ate them. And so yeah, there is a little bit of that woody that woody greeny note to this one. So yeah, a little bit of grassy note to it, a little bit of a floral character, and then yeah, you absolutely have these things in there as placebo, but in front of that, you've got all the big fruity, juicy notes out of this one. So for me, with this one, the black currants and the strawberry are kind of making the beer smell a little bit more juicy, whereas the blackberries and the blueberries are the ones that are giving you the kind of tartness on the top of the nose. But you've obviously got, you know, candied strawberry and all these other things going on. But yeah, blackcurrant and the strawberry for me are forming the juicy side of the beer, but the blackberries and blueberries coming out of this one are really, as I say, forming the kind of sharper side of this beer, actually. Yeah, aroma-wise, this is really quite interesting. And the fruity side of things is quite typical of what we've had from Fermenterarna before, but the malty base is a little bit more kind of just savoury, as I said. So, like, yeah, always take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Bunny Business, a pastry sour beer at 6% ABV, with blackberries, blackcurrants, blueberries and strawberries, some caramel, vanilla and sea salt in it, from Fermenterarna in the Hisingen area in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one and see what's all about. Beautiful smelling beer, let's do this. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. Now I have to say that is very nice. First impression of this one is, you do have those, you know, that sort of caramelly, vanilla-y, more savoury flavour to this beer compared to what we've had from Fermenterarna before. but it's actually, compared to what the aroma would have you believe, it's quite subtle actually. So it doesn't take over the beer, and that's one of the things that I've never that has kind of put me off the pastry sour as a style generally, is how the savoury notes can just take over the beer. But this is nice. I mean, you just start with this one. It's very well balanced because you get the juicy fruity notes that you expect to Fermenterarna in the beginning, but then it just mellows out and gives you this more. It just gives you this little bit of a more smooth, kind of savoury type character into the aftertaste. So that's really interesting for me. I like that about this one. So thumbs up to Fermenterarna. They've done something a wee bit different here, and I think it's come off pretty damn well actually. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lovely beer, this. Absolutely. Really very nicely done. Yeah, I think this is absolutely lovely. It gets a big thumbs up from me. You know, I wouldn't expect any less of Fermenterarna. I really like these guys in the New England IPA and the fruity sour beer category. Like I said, I'd love to try a few more different styles from them. That's the main thing for me. But they have released a few different ones from what I understand. But yeah, another very, very solid beer from these guys. Let's just break it down and describe this beer a little bit more in depth as we always do. We'll start on the middle third of the palate as usual. So, in terms of the middle third of your palate, then you've got that lovely, smooth backbone to the beer. So for me, it's almost a little bit woody at the same time, like a slightly dry, woody character, but it's kind of like a fresh, kind of wholemeal, brown bready bread crust. It's not quite as dry as a bread crust though, so that's why I say it's a bit more woody. Then you have this layer of a slightly more dense, yeah, you've got a layer of a slightly more dense, almost like sponge cakey type thing. And it's like a slightly caramel, brown sugary, sponge cakey character that you get out of this one. So for me, that's really quite interesting. On top of that, you can feel there's a bit of a layer of a kind of white bready note in there, and toward the front of that middle third of your palate, there are little elements of a kind of woody note coming out of the beer. Above the white bread, you start to get the oats, and the oats for me are quite interesting because down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel they are really quite creamy, but as you spread out toward the edges of the palate, they just become a little bit more kind of dry in a sense. But within the oats, you also have this very slightly kind of toffee type flavour. I think toffee is probably a good way to describe it, and you'll find that further forward within that kind of oaty, toffee type layer that you have in this beer, there's a little bit of a more nutty. There is a little bit of a more kind of nutty character coming out of this one. So I do like, again, I like how that goes together in this beer for sure. Yeah. There is, as I say, you've got that vanilla note in there, so you get that kind of yogurt within the oaty layer. As I say, you've got this kind of slightly yogurty, petit filou type thing. That comes out a little bit further forward on that front third of your palate. So you've got the nutty, the kind of yogurty, vanilla, and slightly nutty petit filou note, and the kind of toffee flavour just kind of sitting above that. The malty base in this beer really is quite interesting because it is very different from what we've had from Fermenterarna in the past, but still very, very nice. To be honest with you, I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate. So, yeah, slightly woody, bread crusty layer, a more kind of caramel, cakey, spongy layer, a little bit of a kind of white bready note. Yeah, a little bit of white bready note. Also, a little bit of a kind of oaty, creamy layer. A little bit of a yogurty note on top of that. Then the kind of slightly sweeter toffee notes above there, so very layered in that middle third of your palate. That's very interesting with this one. Let's kind of break this beer down then and just describe it a bit more in depth. yeah, so on the I think on the back third of the palate, then the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a bready build up in there, and then yeah, the back of that, sorry, brain isn't working. The back third of your palate, you can feel the base there. You've got that kind of bread crusty, cakey layer. It is a little bit drier, of course. As I've always said, you know, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate. Sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, you've got the bread crusty and kind of woody layer there that just feels that little bit drier. Then above that, you get the kind of cakey, spongy layer that I was talking about earlier. It feels a little bit lighter and a little bit more airy. Then the white bready layer above that, again a bit lighter and more airy. And you can feel the kind of above that, you get this really smooth, wheaty, but quite dense layer there. So yeah, and I've always found with Fermenterarna, the wheaty character you get out of these beers tends to be very smooth. And then above everything else, you start to get the yeasty characters coming out of the beer. So it's like this very light, farmhousey kind of brown bread, but there's a little bit of honeycomb and, you know, drier brown sugar coming out of the beer there. But definitely on that back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. And then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I do like the way that the fruity side of this beer goes together. So I think that covers the malty side of the beer in this one. Now, as I said earlier, this beer does not have hops in it. I'm pretty sure of that. And that it's quite obvious on the edges of your palate because you don't really have a dryness. You've just got a smoothness. But I would say regardless of that, you do still get a little bit of the kind of placebo effect out of these beers. So there's a wee bit of earthiness in there and a little bit of a herbal character. And the herbal character spreads kind of further forward toward the front corners of your tongue. And there's maybe a teeny little bit of floral note and then a slight grassiness around the front edge of your palate. But it's quite a wet grassiness, if anything. And like I say, this is not, it feels like hoppy character, but there are not hops in this beer, so it is placebo effect, absolutely. But these are the flavours I'm getting, and that's what I really should tell you about. But yeah, other than that, I don't think we need to say anything about the green component in this beer. Let's look at the front third of your palate and the fruity side of things. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. The base of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of dry woodiness for sure, and the kind of bread crusty note, that sort of spongy cakey layer that I was talking about, and maybe just a little bit of the white bread above that. But then you get the juicy fruity notes from the adjuncts coming into the beer. We haven't really mentioned the saltiness in this beer, and I would say the border region between front and middle third of your palate, you've got the kind of spongy, cakey sort of thing in there, and it feels like a little bit of a salty caramel type flavour. That's where the salt in this beer comes out for me. But let's look at the actual fruity side of things. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer for me, the base, absolutely the base of the fruity part of the beer is the strawberry and the blackcurrant, and that lingers there into the aftertaste. But on top of that, the sharper blackberry, blueberry really lingers in this one, and yeah, I think that goes together really, really quite well actually. So on that note, I would say it's quite a straightforward beer. This one, it kind of gives you what you would expect, and I've always said this about sour beers, for me these kind of modern fruity juicy sour beers are quite straightforward in flavour and aroma profile, but if they're done well, they are very nice, and this is yet another example of that, so it gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, I like this. I really do like this. So yeah, big thumbs up from me in terms of the just the fruity side of this one. I really like it. We have had this before from Fermenterarna, but it's just always great. Like I say, bit of strawberry in the base, the kind of blackcurrants sit on top of that, and you get the blueberries and the blackberries kind of sitting there. You can feel kind of some of the berry notes just going around the edges of the palate too, and giving that little bit of juiciness. But yeah, again, a lovely beer this one, but definitely more savoury compared to the other ones we've had from Fermenterarna in the past. I think we can round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, mouthfeel wise, this beer is very, I would say that it's very, it's toward the top end of mid-bodied for me. The carbonation is very smooth. It has a little bit of cleanliness to it, but a slightly more oily and almost creamy mouthfeel to it at the same time. IBU wise, I think technically speaking this beer will be 0 IBUs, but it's probably got 5 or 6, something like that too. I would not be surprised if that was the case. It's got a little bit more dryness the further into the aftertaste that you go. The malt base is very smooth, a little bit of a dry sweetness and kind of creaminess in there as well, and that lingers into the aftertaste. It's really not that sour, this one. Actually, you don't get a lot of tartness and stuff out of this beer, but it's more kind of juicy and fruity in that particular sense. So yeah, kind of a juicy fruity beer this one, but quite savoury underneath, and that's kind of what you expect of a pastry sour. A wee bit different to what we've had from Fermenterarna in the past, but I think equally as good, just as good as a number of the beers that we've had from these guys too. So yeah, I think we should leave it at that for this one. This was the Bunny Business, a pastry sour at 6% ABV with blackberries, blackcurrants, blueberries, strawberries, caramel, sea salt and a bit of vanilla from Fermenterarna in the Hisingen area in Gothenburg here in Sweden. So let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slange, Skull, cheers, see you guys in the next review.